Biologically appropriate raw food or bones and raw food. That is the topic of discussion today, and in this video I am going to show you everything you need to know to feed your dog a BARF diet for optimum health. Now this whole video is going to hinge on the term biologically appropriate and what it actually means, and this is going to be the main premise of the video. And so if you decide to go on a BARF diet for your dog, you are going to hop on the millions and millions of people who have the same premise on the term biologically appropriate. The term biologically appropriate means that dogs are meat eaters. Dogs are meat and bone eaters. And it is the belief that dogs should be fed according to the physiology and their needs from a carnivorous standpoint. Now, people in the BARF community do actually think that dogs are facultative carnivores, or they are more carnivorous than anything else. Choose the term as you like, but that is the actual premise. And I am going to go a little bit into detail as to explain why dogs are more meat eaters than anything else, starting with their jaws. If you look at their jaws, they cannot chew food. They can only wolf things down whenever they eat them. If you look at the carnassial teeth, their back teeth, they are jagged and they are meant to crush meat and bone. In terms of their jaws, these jaws would catch prey and then rip flesh apart. And that is one of the fundamental beliefs of the BARF diet, that you should try to mimic, you should try to replicate what a dog would eat if left to their own devices. Now let's touch upon the kibble versus raw debate, and we are going to start with kibble. And a lot of the criticism from the BARF community is that a lot of these kibble brands do put a lot of ingredients that we do not like wheat, barley, corn, soy, meat and animal derivatives, or even sugar. And that subpar ingredients, whenever we cook them at very, very high temperatures, they render any nutritional value practically extinct. And the BARF community is also very mindful that kibble does sit on a shelf for months and months on end, and that is not fresh food. And we understand from our food that ultra processed foods with very, very long shelf lives tend not to be the best for ourselves. So we are trying to give a lot of that same freshness to our dogs as to ourselves. Another very interesting question, another very interesting premise is to whether dogs are actually carnivores, omnivores, or what are they? And there is a lot of dividing opinion. The BARF community's belief is that dogs are more meat eaters than anything else, and that you should try to feed your dog as much meat as possible, and that you should limit the amount of ultra processed foods that are starch rich or cereal rich, and that this will actually benefit your dog in the long term. Now, within the BARF community, there are actually two subgenres. There are people who believe in vegetables, and there are people who do not believe in vegetables. Let's break them down. Now, the people who believe in vegetables do understand that for dogs to be able to digest vegetables, they need to be pureed or somewhat processed. They cannot break down the cellulose within the vegetables, and they therefore need to be pureed to release the polyphenols that the vegetables do include inside. And these are the nutrients and the vitamins that you want to provide yourself or your dog with. But because dogs cannot digest vegetables in their raw form, they need to be processed somewhat. And so some people add vegetables to their dog's food in order for them to get those added nutrients and vitamins. The other camp is of the 80-10-10 belief, and of the belief that dogs make their own blood sugar. They make their own energy from protein and fat in a process called gluconeogenesis. And because dogs have this carnivorous tendency of making and not needing any starches whatsoever to make their own blood sugar, they only feed their dogs a roughly 80-10-10 diet, which means that 80% of their diet would be lean meat, 10% would be offal, of which 5% is liver and 10% is bone. And yes, bone is a fundamental part of dogs' diet. So we have two very different camps within the BARF diets. We have the people who believe in vegetables, and these vegetables tend to be between 5 and 10% of the overall diet, and they do not get added raw. And we get the 80-10-10 camp, where we do not feed the dog any vegetables whatsoever, and the dog is healthy and happy like that. If you want my personal opinion, after years and years of seeing these trends and these two camps work beautifully with different dogs, I cannot choose one over the other. If the food is good quality, if the ingredients are top quality, and if the manufacturer does things by the book and the quality of the food is fantastic, either foods with vegetables and foods without vegetables have incredible effects on your dog. So my suggestion would be for you to rotate or alternate between the two. My biggest recommendation for you would be to buy something that's already made. Buy something in a tub that you only have to thaw and give to your dog, and more on this later in the video. A very popular trend these days is of people who actually make their own food. They might be tired of Kibble brands, and they might be tired of vets telling them one thing not working after the other, and so they have decided to take the bull by the horns and make their own dog food. The main issue we see time and time again is that people do not do things by the book. They invent and they iterate and they do whatever they want with their food whenever it comes to home cooking for their dog. Now, if you are going to home cook for your dog, I would advise you to follow the 80-10-10 and to maybe add a few vegetables. So for your dog, I would include 70 to 80% lean meat in their diet. I would rotate the actual meat sources I would give my dog. I would then source the offal and the liver separately, and I would use as many offals as possible in terms of lung or spleen or pancreas or whatever, and then I would add the 10% bone, and maybe I would add some lightly cooked vegetables or some pureed vegetables. Now, there are two main problems with this that no many people talk about, but I am going to talk about it. The first one is convenience. You are going to have to go to different supermarkets, to different butchers, to different places to source all these things, and to source all these things in the correct ratios. We see time and time again that people feed too much liver or too much bone or too much whatever, and that has adverse reactions on the dog. What your dog needs is something that would mimic, that would replicate the 80-10-10, and those 80-10-10 ratios are there for a reason. You cannot give your dog 20% of their diet in liver, because that is going to be bad for your dog. You cannot give your dog 40% bone in their diet, because that is going to be bad for your dog. So if you are going to do this, the first thing you are going to encounter as a problem is sourcing all these ingredients. The second problem you are going to have is the actual time that it is going to take you to home cook for your dog. It is very time consuming to prepare and source all the different ingredients and 4 different ingredients at different times for your dog to eat at the same time, twice a day or once a day, or however many times you are feeding your puppy or dog. You might find the inconvenience of sourcing different things and the practicalities of it might not go your way, because guess what? We are all busy. We all have busy jobs, busy lives, busy social lives. We have kids, we have events, we have places to be, and so we not might all have the time and the resources to source all these products and to prepare all these things together at the same time for our dogs. So the one piece of advice I would give you is for you to really dial in your knowledge on dog nutrition before you home cook for your dog. In 99% of the cases, it is a lot better for you to go to your local pet shop, support your local pet shop, and for them to tell you this is a complete food. You thaw this, you give it to your dog once or twice a day, and your dog will be forever happy. It's convenient, it's fast, you have to come and buy every so often, and that is as simple as it gets. That, in our opinion, is the best way to feed raw sustainably for the long term. Now, let's talk about some drawbacks, because we want to be balanced here. Now, the first main problem is vets. Some vets might be against raw food or against a BARF diet, and there are 5 different reasons as to why vets might be against raw. The first one is that vets aren't trained in nutrition. Vets spend their time talking and studying a myriad of things, but nutrition is a subject that they do not spend enough time researching and studying. And so whenever someone comes with something that's new, with something that might be a bit more trendy, they do not like it, they do not understand it, and therefore they do not recommend it. The second reason, and this is an insider in the know story, is that nutrition guides at veterinary schools are paid by the big 3. Whenever we talk about the big kibble companies, these big kibble companies have eyes and fingers in all pies. And guess what? A lot of the literature on nutrition that vets read in vet school is paid for and written and sponsored by those big kibble companies. And so they might advise against raw feeding because they have read that somewhere. The third big reason is that some big conglomerates operate and own vet clinics and vet practices around the world. And so these big corporates and big corporations use veterinary practices as simply sales channels. And so whenever they opt for selling something, they are going to choose to sell their own product as opposed to selling some other trendy or new thing or something completely different. So if you go to a vet clinic that is owned by a big corporation, that big corporation might already belong to a big corporate, and that big corporate will sell their own products in their own veterinary practices. It's just another sales channel, that's all. The fourth reason might have to do with time constraints. Now, whenever we talk about raw feeding takes a little bit more knowledge and a little bit more dedication than kibble. With kibble, you pour a little bit of kibble and that's all that needs to happen for your dog to eat. Whenever we talk about raw diets, there is a lot more information that we need to digest in order to feed our dogs properly. Look at you watching this video and learning about it all. And this is, again, time consuming. So if your vet doesn't have the time to explain, or you don't have the time to educate yourself on raw feeding, that might be another reason why your vet is against raw. And the fifth one, but most important one, is that some people simply have no clue on how to feed their dogs raw. And this is something that really irks me, and we see literally every day. We are big raw feeding advocates. We believe so much in raw feeding, it's ridiculous. My dog and my cat are raw fed, and we promote raw feeding all day, every day. However, the amount of people who come into our branches or our consultations and do raw food incorrectly is staggering. People haven't got a clue. They think they are doing the right thing, and the thing they are doing is literally the worst thing you can do for your dog. They might feed too much fruit and veg. They might mix this with that with the other. They might feed way too much bone or no bone at all, or they might feed something that is completely inappropriate for their dogs, or they might only feed one protein because their dog is too picky or too fussy or whatever, and therefore their dog only gets that one protein. And this is something that we battle against every single day. So no wonder sometimes vets are against raw, because people aren't educated at all, and they sometimes do not want to learn. But guess what? If you are here, you want to learn, so do pay attention. Let's talk about some of the dangers of BARF, and this is something, again, that the BARF community does not want to talk about. There are, of course, certain risks and certain considerations anytime you handle raw meat for your dog day in and day out, especially in the summer, and especially if you live in a hot country. There is the risk of, yes, salmonella, there is the risk of, yes, cross-contamination, and there is the risk of something going wrong in your house if you have more than one dog, if you have a very pretty carpet, or if you have little kids. So it is very important for you to take hygiene very seriously, and to address any single problem you might encounter with raw food. Whenever we handle raw food, whenever we dispose of raw food, whenever we thaw raw food, if raw food leaks, for example, that might be another consideration. How we handle, how we transport it, and all these things do need to be a factor and do need to play a part in how you handle your dog's diet. A lot of people in the BARF community dismiss all these risks, and they do not want to talk about them. But I think that we need to be responsible, and we need to talk about the problems, because tackling problems and talking about them and being mindful about them, that only means that people like yourself are going to be more inclined to taking an interest and to doing things properly. And I think you should take these things very seriously and do things properly. Right, okay, so what now? We have chosen the 80-10-10, we have chosen one brand with vegetables, we have gone to our local pet shop, we have watched videos, we have done this, we have done that. Is raw food for you? Is BARF for you? Well, there's a few considerations I want you to make here. Let's talk about not your dog, but let's talk about your lifestyle. Are you a busy professional? Do you have kids? Do you have a lifestyle that enables you to spend a bit more time preparing, thawing, procuring, going to the local pet shop and preparing raw food for your dog? Do you have fridge space? Are you a vegan or a vegetarian and you cannot fathom and you cannot see yourself handling raw meat in your house? Then maybe raw food is not for you. raw food might be the best thing for our dogs. However, a more important question, in my opinion, is it good for you? Does it suit your lifestyle? So many times whenever I have had this conversation with people, I have made people realize that raw food might not be the best course of action for themselves. They might have spoken to someone about raw food. They might have gone onto Facebook groups or any other social media networks, and they might have been enticed to trying raw food. But the fundamental question is this going to suit your lifestyle? Now, the most important thing, in my opinion, and the one thing I want you to leave with today, is for you to keep it simple. Do not get overwhelmed and do not get bogged down with raw feeding. Raw feeding is very, very simple. It is aimed to mimic, it is aimed to replicate your dog eating a small mammal and maybe a bunch of berries. If you boil it down to that simplicity, to what your dog would eat in the wild if they were left to their own devices, then you will be fine. If you start conducting too much research and if you start listening to too many voices, you are going to get confused. You are going to start looking on social media to all those beautiful platters and wonder, why don't I add this to the diet? Why doesn't my dog have that on their diet? How about this? How about this? How about this? It is really, really important that you keep it as simple as possible. Ask 2-3 questions, put the food down, and the dog will eat it. And if the dog eats it and the dog enjoys it, and it is, in my opinion, the most biologically appropriate food you can provide your dog with, you and your dog will be very, very happy. So keeping it simple will enable you to do this forever. We do not want to be flopping over from one brand to another, to now Kibble, to now raw, to now wet, to now this, to now that. The most important thing is to do this for the long term and to keep it as simple as possible. Now, finding raw foods is a complete different story and another headache for most pet parents. But in this video here, I have put together some of the raw foods you can provide your dog with, and that, in my opinion, could be worth a shot. Always research the manufacturer and always conduct your own due diligence whenever it comes to your dog. Make sure you ask questions and make sure you do things by the book. So watch this video next. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.